Good evening, everyone. Bonjour. My name is Laura Newton, and I am the Minneapolis American Indian Center's Family Services Program Director. I'm really excited that tonight we have a really great lineup of folks here to talk to you about child protection and child protection investigation and mandated reporting. This is being presented by the Metro Urban Indian Directors Family Preservation Subcommittee, which is made up of a number of different organizations that will all be involved in the presentation tonight in some capacity. So next, I'd like to turn things over to Marie McCoy. Maria has graciously agreed to join us tonight and offer to our group here a prayer. Maria is the family empowerment coach at the American Indian Family Center, and we're so glad to have you here tonight. Thanks, Maria.
Which, Laura, for your kind words. I'm humbled to be here tonight. I work at the American Indian Family Center in the Parent Mentor Program. I've worked there since 2006, and from the beginning that I began my work there, it's always been with parents and families, parents that were involved with child protection. So I'm very passionate about the work, and sometimes it's not easy. And tonight is a really important night to learn about your rights and how to navigate through the Indian child welfare process. I'm the daughter. My father was born in 1925 when there were no American Indian advocates, or there wasn't ICWA, and my father was removed from his grandmother's care at 2.5 months and put into an orphanage system, and stayed there for the first 15 years of his life. So as his daughter, I understand the deep pain that never goes away when children are not connected to their family. And as a granddaughter to my grandparents, I can still feel the pain within my own body and my father's pain. So it goes really deep. With that much, I'd like to introduce myself. Buju Mushkane Wase Benesikwe Makwa Indo Dem Mikinak Wajuwing Indunjaba. And I have some Asema here and smudge. And if you have any smudge or tobacco with you tonight, if you'd like to use that in prayer. For the families that may be joining, sometimes those medicines help if we begin to get very emotional about the things that might be talked about in this meeting. If you have that on hand, that could help you with the feelings that may come up. Uju Gitchimani Du. I humbly offer this Asema tonight to the 4 sacred cardinal points of the universe, Wabano, Jawano, Ningabianung, and Giwaden to the north, to Akimama, our Mother Earth, and to Ishbaming, the sky world, to the spirits that guide us and our ancestors, and to Gitchimani Du. Creator, humbly ask that you can open up our hearts and minds tonight so we can really talk about the necessary things that will help support our most sacred gifts in the community, our children, and that we as adults have a responsibility to love and nourish and to ensure that they reach their fullest potential. Help us to be those stewards, those good stewards of the children in the community, opening us up to be your instruments of light, filling us with your sacred beauty so we can walk a good journey and make good decision making when it comes to our children that will extend out to the next 7 generations. Aho, miigwech. Thank you for this opportunity tonight. My thoughts and prayers go with you tonight, that you have a really good meeting and a really good discussion. And thank you, Laura, again.
Miigwech, Maria, it's great to always to hear your words, and thank you for starting us off in a good way here tonight. I'd like to now introduce to you Paula Watts-Zeringer. Paula is here with us tonight. She is a professor at Augsburg University, which is my alma mater. And she's here to talk to us about mandated reporting and tell us all what that is and some more things about it. So I'm going to turn it over to her now. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel so privileged to be asked. Thank you for all the work that all of you are doing, whether you're a parent or foster parent or kin or guardian ad litem ombudsman, child welfare professional. I've worked in a lot of those areas. I'm also a mom and a mom of a 34-year-old foster son from Hennepin County. So my heart and my head are definitely, in this kind of work and in this very passionate about the kind of work and about the things we're going to talk about. I'm a mandate reporter as a social worker, so these are things I need to know. So I've been asked to do this in a very short time. So to help with that, I've created a PowerPoint that is totally plagiarized from the Minnesota Department of Human Services documents, in particular around mandate reporting. So you should have access to that PowerPoint, and I'm going to share it with you too here so we can kind of walk through a few slides. If you have any questions, they'll be monitoring the chat. So you can answer those questions or you can save them to the end. Within the PowerPoint, it gives my information, so you can email me too, certainly if you have questions afterwards. I might defer to some of the expertise that is in this room tonight. I am merely an educator and a mom and a social worker that's teaching full time. So there are folks that are doing this work day in and day out. So I'm going to defer to some of them. You'll hear from them later in the presentation. So hopefully that'll be helpful to you. If you don't get the information you need, you'll hear it later in the presentation, or you can look back to that PowerPoint. Also want to make a shout out to Lucy Favorite, Executive Director of AFAX. We worked together in the past. We actually went to elementary school together, so we've known each other a long time. I can't say enough how important it is from a cultural competence perspective to have someone like Lucy Favorite or others that can provide that cultural context that is so helpful as a mandate reporter to be able to have an understanding of culture and how that impacts the way we perceive things. So I wanted to just make a shout out and to encourage folks to make sure you have those reciprocal relationships, whether they're personal or professional, or hopefully both, with people that identify with these social identities of folks that we're working with. To me, it is real personal because of those relationships that I have, in particular with Lucy. So thank you, Lucy, for letting me know about this and inviting me. This is great. So at this time, I'm going to share the screen and just bring up that PowerPoint. And I'm going to walk through some of the slides very quickly, just because I was asked to touch on a few key items that were identified as needs by participants. So if I skim over it too fast, just know that you have access to it. So as I talked about before, this is a highly plagiarized PowerPoint, not something I'd want my students to do. Most of the information that I received, and it's great to walk around on these websites. They have a foster care website on Minnesota Department of Human Services. They have this whole child protection website. And within those child protection websites, they have these documents that you can take a look at. So the one that most of this information comes from is the Minnesota Department of Human Services Resource Guide for Mandate Reporters of Child Maltreatment from the Child Safety and Permanency Division. So you can take a look at that. If you want more clarity about, specific, what is screened in, what is considered maltreatment, I would suggest looking at this document. So that should be helpful. If you're more of a visual learner, I am, there are some great videos that you can watch that are specifically geared towards mandate reporters. So take a peek at those, they're very helpful. Also, there's a lot of other resources available to folks. This is very small, but take a peek at some of these if you haven't already. I'll just tell you about a couple of them. The Minnesota Family Ombudsman Program, and I believe we have an ombudsman in the house here. Great program, great advocacy, great support just to ask questions of that's specific to cultural families related to child protection. So a great resource. Other ones that are on here, and I know you'll hear from some of them later, can also be very helpful. So just knowledge is power. It's so important as a mandate reporter to have as much knowledge as possible, whether it be about the family or it be about the systems. That's the best way that we can ensure that the child welfare of children is actually prioritized and is as culturally competent as it can possibly be. It's about people being knowledgeable. It's about people having some good working knowledge of the families they're working with and the cultures that they identify with. I'm going to skip over a couple of these and just to talk about the key areas that I was asked to. So who is a mandate reporter? We'll talk a little bit about that. So any of us that are professionally engaged in this work with children and families may be considered a mandate reporter. And we are obligated to report when we have knowledge that a child might be neglected or abused, and if that occurred in the last 3 years. You can certainly always voluntarily report if it's been longer than 3 years, but that's what's statutorily required. There are other pieces that we'll talk about in a little bit too. You can read in the PowerPoint about those as well. I'm going to skip down to some of the things that you might report. So we know that there can be issues around endangerment, sexual abuse, neglect, physical abuse, mental injury, threatened injury. You can read more about what is included in each of those areas more directly within the screening and intake manual. And you can see some of the signs that are identified in the PowerPoint. So you can take a look at that if you haven't done those trainings before, or you just want to refresh your memory. Things do change, so it's important to take a look at those things. One of the issues, or one of the things that mandate reporters that has changed over the years, kind of back and forth, is around domestic violence. So I'm going to skip down to that slide and just talk briefly about that. Excuse my hopping around here. Oops. I have a lot of slides. Here it is. So domestic violence, and I'll just actually use the first slide here. So there are times when domestic violence and child maltreatment co-occur. And so it's important to be aware of what those situations are and when it's reportable. Oftentimes, a child that is involved in domestic violence, whether it's directly witnessing it or being involved in it in some other way, oftentimes it might meet the criteria for physical abuse, mental injury, threatened injury, sexual abuse, or neglect of the child. Specifically, if you look at some of these areas that I've highlighted in red. And so the important takeaway message of this is just to be aware of this information and to understand that it can be difficult for children and it can impact them. And we do have a statutory obligation to report this information. Keeping in mind that mandate reporters are really, the reason why we're mandate reporters is to hopefully get help for the family so the family can be preserved. Also keeping in mind though too that the focus of child welfare is to first protect the child. So sometimes that's difficult when you work in child protection like I did, or you're a foster parent in child protection, or you're a family member trying to understand all of that. The first priority is to protect the child. Then it's talking about, how do we keep the family together? How do we keep the family safe? How do we strengthen the family? So that's just something to be aware of. That's the key focus, is to keep kids safe, and then to work on how do we do that. So sometimes that can be hard for families. Another thing that I was asked to talk about is the timeline. So when do you have to report? And statutorily, it talks about oral reports by mandate reporters must be made within 24 hours of having that knowledge. And then they should be followed up with a written report within 72 hours, excluding holidays and weekends. However, that being said, a lot of county services have 24/7 places where you can report. So sometimes it's best just to try and get that report in right away, if at all possible, so that someone can start addressing it. When it is an emergency, it's important to make that report right away and make it to typically law enforcement and typically where the child resides. If you don't know where the child resides, call it into the county where the incident occurred and they'll send you to the right person. There shouldn't be any wrong door when you're doing mandate reporting. If you call and they're like, oh, we're not the right people to talk to, ask them who is the right person to talk to then. And there should be cross-reporting. So it should be happening that if you call one of the agencies like law enforcement, they're going to cross-report with the county social service agency, with the tribal agency, if that's indicated. When it's not an emergency, most things are going to get reported through the local child welfare agency. It might include contacting tribal welfare agencies. It might include contacting law enforcement because they're going to be cross-referenced anyways. There are times where it might be more appropriate to mandate report to a different agency, and that's indicated here. I think it's easiest just to remember, call your local child welfare agency, call your local law enforcement. There's no wrong door. They should be able to direct you to the right place to report. If you're a foster parent, you can utilize your supports that you have within your agency to help you to understand, what you need to report, when you need to report it, how to report things, and to get the support you need. Because it is daunting. It can be a daunting task to report, but just keep in mind you're helping that family to get the services they need. That's the intent of child welfare and child protective services. I'll skip ahead a little bit too, I want to make sure everybody has time. Things that you should include in the report, just some key things, of course, things about immediate danger, what had happened, what the injuries are, if there are injuries. But other things that are really important to talk about too are culture, to talk about what is going well for the family, what are the strengths of the family, what are services that they might need, what are things that you've provided, and how has that helped? So to really give the report some sort of context of, there are always strengths in families. And so if we can speak to those as well as the needs, that can be very helpful. They're going to talk about this a little later in the presentation, just about what you should expect. So just to keep in mind, you should have an expectation that the family's cultural beliefs should be upheld. So sometimes I think it's good to look at the Minnesota DHS information. I can say as a practitioner out in the field, I started in 1992. Things have changed a lot over the years, and it can be hard to keep up with everything that's going on. It can be hard to do everything that you're expected to do. And so sometimes it's a really good partnership when mandate reporters can work with county agencies, can work with law enforcement, and really be mindful of how culture can influence and be a strength for families. And I think sometimes we forget that. I'm reminded by Maria's lovely story and prayer, just about the historical trauma that has occurred within the Native American community and the impact that has had, as one might imagine. So it's really important to just be aware of those things. And it talks about that in the mandate reporter training, a little mandate reporter guide even more. So it'd be good to look at that, just so you're aware of that. And then last, I'm just going to skip down to why might somebody come? Why might child protection come to your door to talk to you? And it can happen to any of us. I have a biological child, I have my foster child, and so stuff happens. who knows, it's good to just be prepared. And I can't stress that enough. Knowledge is key. Being connected, having good supports, having good advocacy, and being aware of what your rights are can be very helpful. But these are some things that might trigger. I used to be a school social worker too, so I know that some of these things come up. So thinking about discipline issues, if you're a foster care protector, foster care provider can't use physical punishment. And so just being aware of when you can use corporal punishment or not. This is defined very well in state statutes, but also in the manuals that I referenced at the very beginning. So just being aware of your discipline and what you're using, and if it's culturally consistent or consistent with what is helpful for the child. Foster care folks too, if you're a foster care provider using restraints, or if you're a professional using restraints, you want to be aware of that. And those are not supposed to be used for discipline. They're supposed to be used to keep a child safe. So being aware of that. School issues, like if there's lack of communication or follow through, attendance issues, truancy, behavior. Not that these things need to go through a child protection or child welfare process, but sometimes they might get into that process just because the school is looking for some help for the family, some help to try and help that child. Danger kinds of situations. So access to medication, whether it's prescribed or not, whether it's prescribed for the child or not. Do they have access to medication that they could overdose on, or that would be harmful to them in some way? So being aware of those kinds of things. Or dangerous substances, people, materials, all of those things. Wanted to be aware of those things. Delinquency issues, which are really a different separate issue, but they can roll over into those child protection or those child welfare issues. So being aware of that. And then lastly, mental health issues. Whoops. And again, trauma can look like a lot of things. And so don't be afraid if someone comes knocking at your door. You can use that support that you get from those child protection folks so that you're able to get the help that you need. So again, not do all of these end up in the child protection system or the child welfare system, but they sometimes can overlap. And it's just it's a matter of folks talking about it and talking about what families need so that needs are met and there's no need for further assistance. Okay, lastly, really important, self-care. I cannot tell you how difficult it has been to be a parent. It's the hardest thing I've ever done and the most important thing I've ever done. And it's really important that you take care of you so that you're able to take care of others. And so this is a great link for social workers and for practitioners, foster parents, anybody that's interested in some quick and easy ways to take care of yourself. When we fill our own tanks, we're able to fill others. So it's a good message and it's worth hearing about. Interestingly enough, the NASW Social Worker Code of Ethics just included pieces about this within our ethical practice guidelines. So it's really important. So for all of us, taking care of yourself. And then the other piece I would say is just being aware of your rights, being aware of the rights of the kids that you're working with, and being aware of those mandates. Knowledge is power. So it's super important that you have the information you need. If you're not getting it, call someone, call me, contact us, any of the people that are here tonight that can be helpful. This is my contact information. I know that was super fast, but hopefully you'll have access to this PowerPoint and you can look at some of this stuff and get some of those questions answered when you need them answered. I'm gonna stop sharing. Thank you so much. And I didn't see if there were any questions.
Yes, thank you, Paula. So we did have a question and it was answered, live. The question was, if you want to expand on anything, but I did see a question about what about making a mandated report for an already open investigation that has not gone full-blown chips, but the county is just providing services or they're monitoring or investigating. Do you make a new report or just talk to the existing worker? Jacqueline Bolio, who is a county attorney for Hennepin County, or assistant county attorney at Hennepin County, did state that you would make a new report that would go through the screening process, and it may be additionally assigned to the same investigator, but it does need to be screened in or taken as a new report. If you have anything else to say, I don't think there were any other questions.
No.
So, and I think that you did touch on something that we had just said earlier, that I think you did say about, you know, anonymity if you are a, or could you say something about that?
I forgot to touch on that a little bit more directly. So just a reminder, as a mandate reporter, you are entitled to anonymity. You might be called, that's with a little caveat, that you could be called to testify. And so you are protected, but there is this possibility that you might be called to testify. And so you just need to be aware of that. But we also, there are legal issues that can occur if you're a mandate reporter and you don't report. So it's very important that you're aware of what your obligations are and that you meet those, because there are penalties if you do not.
Great, thank you so much, Paula. Next, I would like to introduce a few folks. So Jacqueline Bolio is an assistant Hennepin County attorney, and she's here with us tonight, as well as Michelle Soto from the Ramsey County. She's a Ramsey County ICWA investigator. And so I want to introduce them both. They're here to talk about intake in the child protection process and how things work in the respective counties that they work in. So thank you for being with us here tonight.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Again, my name is Michelle Soto, and I'm a Ramsey County ICWA child protection worker. So I don't actually work in screening. I am an investigator, but I am going to review some of the screening processes that we have here in Ramsey County. If you guys have any other further questions, please feel free to comment, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. So screening, what determines whether or not a case is screened in or screened out? So in general, there are DHS guidelines that all maltreatment reports have to go through in order to determine whether or not they can even be screened in as a case. So in Ramsey County, we have several things that we kind of look at to determine whether or not a case should be screened in or screened out. There are two different kinds of cases that we do get, and those are family assessments or family investigations. And often you'll hear those as FAs or FIs. And so some of those things that the screeners look for in terms of when they do receive a maltreatment report are the following. So one, they look at the frequency or similarity of past and current reports, the severity of past reports, and the severity of the current allegation. And that just speaks to what is exactly being reported. How severe is it? What is happening? The age of the children, and that's pretty important as well. Age is important because smaller children, younger children don't have as much ability to protect themselves or let others know what's going on. And so age does play a key factor in that. The younger the child is, the more vulnerable they are. Familial support, and the screeners will go through this information, and they will also look through past reports as well to find these key things. Familial support just refers to how much support does a family have in the community, with friends, family, that kind of thing. And then lastly, they'll look at parents' protective capacity. And again, that's just in reviewing some of those databases that we have. Protective capacity is, could probably go on a little bit longer about that, but protective capacity is more so speaking about how or when is the parent able to provide safety for their child? Do they have the ability? Are they willing to provide that protective capacity to a child? And again, the screeners will go through several different databases to find that information. So it's not all based on one specific thing. It's a cumulative thing that it's based on. And so after the screener reviews all of those things, they will decide, and with consulting with DHS guidelines, they will decide if a case would be screened in or screened out. If it's screened out, then you don't have to worry about necessarily FA or FI. If screened in, it will either be an assessment or an investigation. And so once they determine what track they want to do, assessment or investigation, it's sent to a supervisor who then reviews in the screened in report, reviews it, makes sure that the DHS guidelines are being met according to what they need to be. And then the supervisor also reviews screened out reports. So at the end of the day, that supervisor gets to make the final decision as to whether or not it was appropriate for it to be screened in, screened out, or an assessment or an investigation. The supervisor does have the ability to overturn that decision. And in that case, then they would let the screener know, hey, I think that this needs to be an assessment or an investigation. Here are the reasons why. And again, that's the same for the screened out reports. So it can be a little more complicated than that at times. But that is essentially what our screen in, screen out process looks like. And then I will have Jacqueline take over.
Thank you, Michelle. That was really thorough in a very short amount of time. So I was just going to talk about the Hennepin County process as in the last 2 years that has changed a little bit. Everything still goes by the maltreatment guidelines. And so any reports need to meet those guidelines to be screened in. The way we do it though is a little bit different. Hennepin County started something called IRT. It's the intake review team. And so it's basically a team of individuals who are looking at the reports and making the determination about whether those will be screened in or not. And I think just as Michelle said, in Ramsey County, they have more than one person look at the report and make sure that, that the decision was made in conjunction with the guidelines. But in Hennepin County, we have a team of people doing that. The team and I sit on the IRT team at this point. So that's why I'm here talking about that. The current members of the team are a couple people from intake and screening, a child protection field social worker, an investigator, and somebody from the Parent Support Project. Currently, they are all employees of Hennepin County. In a couple of weeks, starting June 21st, Hennepin County will start having an individual from a community organization sit on that intake review team. And so basically how a session goes is the person facilitating the session literally draws a map of who's in the family, like mother and father, and who the kids are, who's in the home, so the team can get an idea of who the family consists of. They do read the report out to the group and then identify the section of the guidelines that's being indicated to determine whether or not the report fits those guidelines. So if it's, a domestic abuse allegation, then you would read out the section regarding domestic abuse and decide whether or not that fits, the report that you're getting fits within those guidelines. If it does, then you decide whether it should be screened in or not. So that's the same as what Michelle said as far as Ramsey County, and the same determination regarding family assessment or investigation. There are certain types of allegations that are required to be an investigation. I think the easiest one sort of to think of is like a sexual abuse allegation, something that is very serious and needs to be looked at right away for child safety. Not all of the reports that come into Hennepin County do go through the intake review team. There are some limits on staffing. And so if reports come in, if too many come in for the team to handle during the day, they are still reviewed by multiple people. The screener would consult with the supervisor, and then the supervisor would forward that on to an attorney in the county attorney's office. They do this on a daily basis and make sure that each report is reviewed by more than one person and in more than one area. So it does involve someone involved in social work and also an attorney. Also, there are a few types of reports where there isn't really discretion. It's not really a question of whether it's like if somebody is a predatory offender, if they've been convicted of a predatory offense, against a child, for example, those are automatically screened in. And so those types of reports don't go to the intake review team because it's not really, you're not really deciding whether or not that should be screened in or not. It's the fact of somebody being a predatory offender will makes that an automatic screen in. I do think it is, I know that it's difficult, I think, for families to not understand or not be aware where a report is coming from. And I know that it was mentioned before that it is required to be confidential by law. And the sort of the impetus behind that is to make sure that child safety is, that people aren't scared to report something because they, the family will find out who made the report. And so that is something that is protected. And that if it does get assigned either through a family assessment or an investigation, that investigator, that child protection worker, does need to maintain that confidentiality and make sure that they're not divulging the identity of the reporter. And just because something is screened in or screened out doesn't mean that, there will necessarily be a maltreatment finding or that a case will open. They sometimes, the report might have sounded like something really happened, but the investigator goes out and, that just aren't the facts. So screening is just the first step. And if it does get screened in, then it goes on to the next process that they're going to be talking about. So I will pass it back to Laura to introduce the people talking about investigation tonight.
Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to restart my video again. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. We have had a number of questions here. I think that some of them will likely be answered in this next section. So I'm going to kind of wait till the end. People are also trying to answer what they can live in the chat. So if you, I will be reviewing some of those for those of you that are on Facebook and might not be hearing some of those questions. So I will just quickly state them right now so that the next presenters can have an idea of some things that people were asking. There was someone asking about having a hoarding issue with a 12-year-old in the home, and is that reportable? We have another question about, is there a law or policy that's put into place? The police are to look at finding family and relatives that can take the child if the child is present during an arrest, or if police are involved in removing the child because child protection was called before taking the child to, say, a shelter or a 72-hour shelter or foster home while the parent's being investigated. So a couple things there just for our panelists to know are being asked. I would like to now turn things over to the folks that are going to be talking about specifically about investigations. So I believe we have here Michelle Soto again from Ramsey County, Ramsey County ICWA, and then oh my goodness, Carrie Torberg from Child Protection Investigations. She is the unit supervisor in Hennepin County. Eric Jane, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, from Family Group and Early Intervention Facilitator at Ramsey County, and Joey Glassman, Child Protection Investigations Unit Supervisor at Hennepin County. Thank you all for being here. And so I will turn it over to the first person who is going to speak. So is that you, Carrie?
It's me. Can you see me?
Okay. Yes, I can.
Okay, I can only see you, so I'm just gonna go.
Yes, you're good. Thank you,
Okay.
Carrie.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here tonight. Like Laura said, I supervise a investigations unit in Hennepin County, and Joey is another panelist that's going to also talk in this section. And the two of us supervise the two ICWA units in Hennepin County in investigations. So what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about once a report is screened in, what are just some general things that a person can expect in terms of the assessment phase. And then Michelle is going to talk next specifically about inquiring about Native American heritage and ICWA and MIFPA and all of that. So mine's going to be just more of a broad overview. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I have some notes to reference. So once a case is screened in and a child protection social worker is assigned to assess the report, we have a timeline to abide by, essentially to see children and any primary caregivers that we need to see. And so if a report is screened in, it can be assigned to 3 different tracks. And it's kind of been mentioned already. So the 3 different tracks or ways an assessment can be assigned would be a family assessment, a family investigation, or a facility investigation. And a facility investigation would be those cases where it's an investigation regarding like a licensed foster home. So the family cases would be the family assessment, family investigation. So if it's a emergency case or an imminent harm case, Jacqueline was giving some of those examples, the more serious reports are screened in, and we have a 24-hour response time to see any alleged victims and the primary caregiver. If it is a family assessment or a family investigation requiring, that's not an emergency, we have 120 hours to do that, which is 5 days, and the clock starts ticking at the time that the report is received. And so when we receive the report, the initial things that we're looking at is, what is the report? What is the concern? Typically, workers are going out sooner than that last day of that timeline to assess that report. But one of the initial things that we need to do is cross-report to law enforcement. And Paula mentioned that earlier. And so any report that is screened in, we send to law enforcement. And they tell us whether or not they're going to be involved. And so they, of course, are typically only going to be involved on reports that there may be a criminal matter or a criminal investigation is needed. Otherwise, they're not co-investigating with us, and we go on without their involvement. Just want to note that the majority of reports that are screened in are assigned as a family assessment. Regardless of how the case is screened, we're doing the same things in terms of interviewing all the children in the home, talking to all of the parents, reaching out to any collateral contacts that may have pertinent information to helping us assess what is going on. It may be a situation where we need to get medical records or talk to schools, any other sources that who might have information that can help us more fully assess what's going on. The child protection investigators' focus is on child safety and trying to engage the family in a positive working relationship to resolve what's going on if there is an issue going on. So like Jacqueline said, you know, it may not be a legitimate report, and that's our job to, you know, objectively look into and assess and figure out. Our lens is always on what is the alleged child maltreatment and on child safety. So along the way, we're assessing things like, is what we're learning validating what was in the report? Are there additional concerns that have come up? Who else should we be talking to? Do we need a safety plan? Do we need to open for ongoing services? Do we need to consult with the county attorney's office? Does the family need any community resources that we can refer them to? And I just want to note that most reports, most assessments and investigations resolve without needing any further services after the investigation phase. I know that current data in Hennepin County shows that 15% of our investigations close in the investigation, and the family is not referred on for ongoing child protection services. So 75% is what we're closing. 15% we're opening. Sorry if I said that wrong. So 15% we're opening, 75 we're just closing. And that could mean that we're just closing and no referrals are made, or we may be referring to the parent support outreach program, or referring to community agencies that a family is voluntarily accepting services from. If an additional report is received during an open investigation or assessment, and it's new information and new concerns, then that does start a new timeline. And so we have to go out again and assess those additional concerns. And so that may prolong how long a case stays open for. Sometimes during an investigation, we have to look at placement if children are not safe where they are. And so if that is the case, child protection social workers don't have the ability to make that placement decision. Out-of-home placement is decided either through a police hold or through the court. And so in an investigation, we may get a report where the police have already placed a child on a 72-hour hold, or that may happen during an investigation and we need to work with law enforcement to request their assistance with placing the hold, but ultimately the police are who have the authority to do that. The other avenue that we go through sometimes is a court order to either ask the court to order that a child remain or be removed from the home, or that the child remain with, say, a relative who's caring for the child but is not the custodial parent. There was a question that was asked earlier about whether or not there was a law that the police have to follow in terms of looking at kinship placement at the time of a police hold, and there's not. There are a lot of cases that we've had where officers do make calls on the scene and find families. And there's a lot of times that they don't, but there is no law dictating that. That is where we come in, that if a police hold is part of a child protection issue, then we are looking at family as soon as possible. So kin, relatives, whoever we can work with to try to get the child out of non-relative care as soon as possible. And then just real briefly, at the close of a family assessment, the only formal determination that we make is whether or not ongoing child protection services are needed, which is different from a family investigation. So a family investigation also determines that. But the other decision that we're making is whether or not the child was abused or neglected, depending on what the allegation is in the report. So if the screened in allegation was inadequate neglect, inadequate supervision, at the close of the investigation, we have to decide, do we have a preponderance of information to say whether or not that happened? And again, looking at whether it's referral to ongoing services or community resources. And then ultimately, an assessment or investigation can be open for 45 days. So not all cases are open that long, but the state gives us a guidance that our assessments should be completed within that time. Of course, there are things that prolong that, and if there's good reason for it to go beyond that, that is okay. But that is, we strive to have them completed by then. And I would say the average amount of time that cases are open is somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks. That they don't all go to 45 days, but that is how long we have to complete. The other thing I just want to mention real briefly is that if maltreatment determinations are made at the close of the investigation, the parents and any alleged offenders have the right to have that information and to appeal that decision. And so they can appeal that decision to the social service agency. And if the agency upholds that maltreatment finding, it can then go on for a further reconsideration through the Minnesota Department of Human Services. So that was a lot of information spoken very quickly, but that is what I have to share about that. So I think I'll pass it over to Michelle at this point.
Thanks, Carrie. So starting with identifying American Indian heritage, very, very important that when a case opens, that the family give any and all information they have in regards to whether or not they have American Indian heritage in their family. And so the main point of doing that is because we are to ask those questions of families. And so that's to determine what the heritage is, trace back the lineage, and to identify what tribe or tribes might be involved. Another component of that too is to, when we do send off notices to the tribe, letting them know that a case has opened, they do get back to us in regards to enrollment or membership status as to whether or not your child is eligible for enrollment or membership. And then another key point of that as well is that tribes may also have specific legal resources or community resources that families are eligible for. So if you are Native American and you have heritage, regardless of if you know what tribe specifically, if you don't know the name of the tribe, that's okay. Please let us know as soon as possible. That does also mean in further investigation, you may be qualifiable under ICWA. And so that's probably the main most important reason why we want to know if there is Native heritage. And so it is really important, and we are responsible for inquiring and sending notices to the tribes to inform them of an open case. And then this is also for your protection as well, because the tribe does have the ability to step in at any point in time during a case as well. Moving to tribal involvement. So when there is a potential for court involvement, the agency will review those concerns with the tribal representatives to seek their input. Tribes can choose to take cases to tribal court if they see fit. Tribal reps do often really like to attend what we call internal mappings here in Ramsey County. And so what internal mappings really mean, and my coworker Eric is probably going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But what the purpose of internal mappings is to lay out all of the safety concerns, the familial strengths, the people involved in the case, to really discuss and make a decision about if it meets high priority to be moved to court, or if there is enough existing safety in the case where we can maybe just close out and refer for additional services. Ramsey County does partner with a Nokomis Circle liaison to the Anda Young Center, and she specifically works with Ramsey County child protection workers and with the family to bridge any gaps between the agency and the community, and as well to advocate for clients too. And I do have listed her information below. Her name is Mariah Smith. I put down her email and her phone number. And for me as an ICWA worker, Mariah is always welcome to attend any and all in-person meetings between the agency and families, or any other support system that the family really wants to have there to support them. I obviously welcome that, and I really appreciate that when families come forward and are able to support. But Mariah is the main person that we do work with as well. And obviously, if a family is not comfortable having her there, then that's your decision. I would respect that decision as well. But she is someone who works in the community very closely with the community, and who is an advocate for families as well. Moving on to more about MIFPA. MIFPA plays in terms of sending notices to the tribe. So when a case is opened, well, I should restart. MIFPA specifically is the Minnesota Indian Family Preservation Act. It's specific to Minnesota. I don't know what other states use specifically, but what it essentially means is that we are required to send the MIFPA notice within 24 hours of a case opening, whether it's an assessment or an investigation. And that also requires that we provide a verbal notice to the tribe or tribes that are involved. So if a family has identified several tribes with heritage or lineage to that, then we do have to provide a verbal notice. Often what we do is we will call someone, we have like a list of representatives who we call and leave a verbal notice to them, just kind of detailing what the case is about, and where we plan or what we plan on doing in terms of meeting with the family. There are times when tribal reps will want to come out and meet with us with the family. And so the agency is required to send the MIFPA notice to all tribes again. And then the agency also sends, along with the MIFPA notice, a genogram and a screened in child protection report to the tribe, so that the tribe knows exactly what the report and the allegations are. And the notice itself, the MIFPA notice, contains the following information: the name of the child, the date the report was made and screened in on, and who the worker spoke with to provide the verbal notice of the case opening. So those three key things are the things that we send to the tribe. And that's also why it's very, very important that if there is Native heritage in your family, that you identify that as soon as possible, so that we can figure out what tribe we need to send to and what tribe we need to involve in the CPS process. And then lastly, and I'm going kind of fast here, guys, so if you have any questions or anything like that. Lastly is paperwork. And I know this is something that probably varies from county to county, at least from conversations. It sounds like Hennepin County may not have as much paperwork that they go through with clients. In Ramsey County, we do. We have a good amount of paperwork that we have. Some of you may have seen us with some pretty thick folders. Not all of the paperwork in there we use, but there are specific documents that we have to go through with clients. And so some of those are data privacy, which just means that everything that we talk about is confidential between myself and the client, and then whoever they are wanting to be there. So an advocate, a family member, if they give verbal consent for that, that's fine as well. The identification of an Indian child, which I spoke about as well. And that form specifically asks more in-depth questions about Native heritage, about who is Native American in your family, what tribe is involved, if the father of your child is Native American. It just kind of goes more in depth to collect that information. We have a mental health screening form that we review with parents. And the purpose of doing that is just to help address or identify any mental health concerns that you might have for your child. Insurance forms. We basically just fill out what insurance provider you have. And the purpose of that form is to make sure that you have insurance. And if you don't, then we would do everything possible to try and get you insurance or refer to whatever services needed to help that process. SEY, which stands for Sexually Exploited Youth. And that's a form that we review with all kids. I think some families get a little like, why are you asking me that question? When you ask, oh, do you have any concerns for sexual exploitation with like a 2-month-old? But it is something that we do have to ask regardless of the child's age. And there are certain key factors that we review with parents to look out for if they do have concerns. And so if there was concerns of that, then we would open up some more services to address that. And then lastly is our parent involvement form. And we use that form to collect information on how involved parents are with their kids. So mom, dad, and if, or a foster care provider, whatever it may be, guardian, if that child has any contact with paternal or maternal family, we just use that to really kind of figure out who is involved with this child, who are extra support systems and whatnot. You guys are never ever required to sign anything that you don't feel comfortable signing. And I want to make that very clear. I have had lots of families who don't feel comfortable signing anything, and I completely understand. There have been times as well when people want to keep forms to review them, which is fine as well. I think that the more you know about what you're signing, the better. So please do not hesitate if you do not feel comfortable signing something to say that. We will work with you. And like I said, it's not mandatory that these forms are signed, but it is from an investigator standpoint that we do review them with you. And again, if you want copies or anything like that of signed paperwork, we're more than happy to provide that as well. And so really just the purpose of these forms is to really just identify any concerns a family might have regarding their child. And then the agency will make referrals for services if appropriate. It's not something that you have to do. It's really just one of those things that we do to make sure or to help out if there's anything else that we can do. Kind of went through that pretty quick, but again,
Okay.
if anyone has
Thank you
any
so much,
questions.
Michelle.
Yeah.
We actually have to move on, I think, to Eric, but there will be opportunity for you. We have a number of questions. So once Eric finishes, and Joey, then I want to spend a little bit of time. There's a number of questions from Facebook on investigations. So I'd like to make sure that we save a little bit of time for that. So
Okay.
Eric
Thanks,
Jane,
Laura.
thanks for joining us. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, excellent. Do you see my screen?
Yes,
And does it say Science of Safety Mapping and Safety Planning?
that's correct.
Oh, good. That's the right screen. Okay, good. So, thank you everyone for allowing me to be here. So real quick, my name is Eric Jane. I am the supervisor of the Early Intervention Unit at Ramsey County. And what our unit is we are rolling out and really developing and increasing a more aggressive way of problem solving and trying to avoid placements when possible with families at the early stages of cases in child protection. We follow a science of safety practice model. This was a practice model developed in Australia in the 90s, and it was a practice model that was developed by social workers, child protection workers in Australia, because they were trying to address the racial disproportionality issue of Aboriginal children in foster care compared to their white counterparts. We also utilize the family group decision-making model for collaborative family engagement as we blend it with the science of safety. So the goals of our unit at Ramsey County is to develop culturally appropriate plans to resolve concerns using the expertise and the wisdom of the families, promote critical thinking among family and among the agency, just to try to really figure out collectively in partnership what everyone can do to help make sure that things are safe at home moving forward. And again, as it was when it was created and developed in Australia on the other side of the world, we here also are trying to utilize and roll out this practice model to reduce the disproportionality issue that we have in child protection. Separating children from their parents is traumatic for children. That's what research shows. So that is a belief that and something that we accept at Ramsey County. So it has to be avoided at all costs. We are again committed to reducing out-of-home placements for kids and thinking of that disproportionality issue. So in order to really engage and thoughtfully come up with safety plans, we need to figure out how to get from this worry, this place of danger, point A, to this destination safety point B. So we really have to thoughtfully slow down for a moment in child protection as things are coming in really rapidly, cases are coming in, workers are inundated with cases. We in our unit are really compelled to work with all of the investigators at child protection on the front end to engage with them and figure out what we can do to come up with a good thoughtful approach to family engagement to avoid placement with kids. So in our process, we have questions that guide us in these internal mappings, which Michelle had talked about. Our internal mappings for cases will involve child protection worker, their supervisor. We'll invite tribal reps. We'll invite Mariah from Andai Young. Ramsey County attorneys representations will sometimes be present as well. And what we talk about is what the issue is. Why did this case get screened in? And that's our harm statement. What is it exactly that we're worried about happening if things don't change? And then what are the barriers getting in the way of finding success and having safety at home? So this exercise of mapping it internally helps prepare the agency and other professionals to really analyze the situation and make reasonable, well thought out judgments about what the situation is. It also really allows us to come up with really short, concise, passionate statements that we can share with the family. A lot of times what happens, I think, in child protection is that we get inundated with a lot of the deficiencies, a lot of the things that are bad that's going on, and we really never honor the good stuff that's happening. So this compels all of us to critically think about those existing strengths and those existing safety. So number 3 here is what needs to happen. So we have a statement called a safety goal statement that would be the mirror inverse of what we would call our danger statement. Again, this is a very clear, concise, passionate statement that we can share with the family and everyone else so that they know what the worries are. And lastly, I want to talk about the cultural competence piece, that when we map these cases, when we engage in our preparatory stages of engaging with families, we think about what could be the historical trauma that could be impacting the way that families are engaging with us. What is it that might even be the strengths? What is it that is within traditions? What is it within the culture that they've been able to tap into to help cope with different historical trauma? And then appealing to other representation into the group mapping to get some insight and some perspective to help us all prepare for family engagement. And then I want to end just with our practice principles at the end here. I'm looking at the clock, so sorry for rushing through it, but I just want to make sure I have enough time here for the next panelist. I will say that our goal, again, is to engage with the family. What I talked about is more the preparatory steps that we need to slow down, think about, analyze the situation. That's something that professionals, we need to do so that we can really thoughtfully engage with the family, ask good questions so that we can get good answers about what everyone can do to make sure that things are safe moving forward, and we don't have to have out-of-home placement. So that's my time. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate being here.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate you coming on today. I know that there is a lot of information being shared here tonight. Please note that this is going to be recorded. So I did see just a note from someone saying, I'm typing questions and I'm trying to listen. It will be recorded, so you can always come back and listen. We are going to be sharing all of our contact information. The reason we are doing this as part of the Metro Urban Indian Directors Family Preservation Group is specifically to provide information for families and for professionals, but really for families, we want to get this information out to you. So we will have opportunities besides just during this time that we have tonight, if you need to still talk to someone. So I just want to make sure that people understand that all of the folks are committed to answering questions as best we can. But if we do run out of time for something, we will certainly take your information and try to get you connected to someone that can answer your question. With that, I would like to turn it over to Joey Glassman, who's here from Hennepin County Child Protection Investigations, and let her discuss her piece. Thank you so much, Joey.
Thanks, Laura. Does investigations, all the ICWA investigations with Carrie's unit. We work together as a team. So I'm going to probably make this pretty quick because I know we're short on time. Eric talked a little bit about how Ramsey County is working with signs of safety in trying to reduce out-of-home placements and disparities. Hennepin County, we call it something a little different in investigations. We currently are using what we call is critical family response meetings. And families that come into investigations are oftentimes offered a critical family response meeting when they become involved and when there are concerns about the children either potentially going into out-of-home placement or the safety within the home. The meetings are voluntary. They are for the parents to decide who they want at those meetings, family, relatives, friends, community members, tribal representatives. They choose who they want to attend those meetings. Our family group conference people facilitate the meetings, not the child protection investigations worker. The meeting essentially is trying to come up with a safety plan to create safety around the children within their community, so out-of-home placement is not needed. The investigator that's working with the family will bring to the meeting their concerns. They will provide what was reported during the investigation. Any allegations, they will provide information that's relevant in regards to any court orders, custody orders, visitation orders, DANCO orders to the group. They will also provide any worries that child protection has, any strengths that the child protection worker has seen within the family. The family will then provide what their strengths are and what their worries are for the children. A plan then will be created by the family and the community that will be written up, placed into a safety plan, and presented to child protection, to the investigator. Everybody agrees on that plan moving forward for the safety of the children. And with these meetings, we hope to alleviate out-of-home placements. And in fact, when our concerns come up and we are concerned about removal, or we're concerned about safety within the home prior to going to court or to consulting with a county attorney, we will do a critical family response meeting. It's our first step in trying to alleviate, again, out-of-home placement or court involvement. So it is similar to what Ramsey is doing, but we do call it something a little different. And that's kind of what I've got for our critical family response meetings. I'm not sure, Laura, who's going next.
Okay, it's coming back to me.
Oh, okay.
So we are at the end of this section as far as what we have time for. However, there are some questions here, and so I do want to, I guess, go over a little bit of time to see if our group that we've had here or any of our other panelists that might be able to answer a question. You can certainly turn on your cameras at this time if you feel that you might be able to answer some of the questions that we have had. We did have a couple of questions that are pretty specific, and because of that, it's very hard to answer some of those things just in the chat. And so you might see that Jill Esch, who is the ombudsperson for American Indian Families, has come on and answered a few things. She has left her information, but I'm going to actually ask if she is she able to turn on her camera? Could you just share your information for people that have had some of those specific questions that probably need a little bit more in-depth conversation in order to give them the best answer?
So as the ombudsperson for American Indian Families, if the case is in a county, I can provide information and resources. If the case is in tribal court, I cannot assist. And I have been putting my contact information for people to email me, and then we can go from there. So
Can you also state that out loud? Because I'm not sure if that's gone onto the Facebook page.
So as the ombudsperson for American Indian Families, first name is Jill, Jill, dot E as in Edward, S as in Sam, C as in Charlie, H as in Harry, at state, STATE, .mn.us. My telephone number is 65643-2523, but it's always best to email. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Jill. The other thing, there's a couple of other questions here. One of the questions that was brought up, let's see here. I'm just trying to make sure we've answered a few of these that maybe didn't get answered right away. Let's see here. Regarding investigation, I know that Jacqueline Bolio did provide a response to this, but there was a really a good question about whether or not if a child was gay and it was known to be that their parent was openly homophobic and it was going to be a very difficult situation for them in the home. Would that be something that could be reported to Child Protection? Obviously, it could be reported, but would that be something that Child Protection would be involved in? How would that be considered? If anyone would like to answer that, that would be great. If someone could jump in. I know that Jacqueline did give some more information, but.
Right, and I think those types of, unfortunately, I think the guidelines are, the threshold's fairly high for the mental injury type of reports. I did put the guidelines in the chat or in the answer, and I'm trying to remember back, but it does have to show, I don't think someone living with a child just saying, just being openly homophobic would necessarily be enough. It would need, they do need to show that there's an effect on the child's, that there's a pretty significant effect on the child's mental health. So that's, it really depends on the situation. If the parent, repeatedly says things that are really negative and those things that they say or do are directly impacting the child's mental health in a pretty severe way. So it does really need to show that active connection between what the parent is doing or saying and the effects on the child. So, and that's just with respect to, what is required under the guidelines for that mental injury.
Okay. Another question that was asked is if a child and parent are not enrolled, but if the grandparent is enrolled, will the parent and child still be eligible for services? Will Child Protection Services continue to look further to see if there is Native heritage past the line of the parent? Are they mandated to look into this further? And yeah, are they mandated to look into this further? So if someone could answer that, that would be appreciated.
I can hop on, I guess, too. And I'm sorry, I didn't see where the question was, but basically, because these determinations are made by the tribe, it's not something that, the county's not making that determination. We would send, during the investigation, we'd send the MIFPA notice to the tribe, and if it opened into a case, we'd send an ICWA notice. But that, and we, I know at least in Hennepin, we try to send as much information as possible as far as, parent and grandparent and that type of thing. But it is really up to the tribe to make the determination. And so And it is, I know, as you know, Laura, it's a very tribe by tribe, specific determination about whether they will recognize children who are enrolled or, descendancy. But those are all tribe by tribe determinations. But it is, if someone believes they have heritage, they need to let the investigator or people involved in their situation know, and they are obligated to reach out to those tribes and to make those inquiries.
And then Laura, I'll just jump on to say that I have worked on a number of cases where the grandma was enrolled and grandma reached out to the enrollment office, and the case went from the county saying the ICWA didn't apply, but based on information that grandma provided, the tribe then came in to say that the children were eligible for membership. So it's really, really important for grandparents to be involved by reaching out to the tribe, because cases have gone from the tribe saying no to when grandma contacts them, then the tribe can recalculate. The Minnesota Chippewa case that I worked on last year, the case was referred to me by a tribe. They said that the children were not eligible. I referred grandma to the Minnesota Chippewa tribe. The Minnesota Chippewa tribe went and recalculated grandma's blood quantum, and it came back and it went from 30-something% to like 54%. So that is important information about reaching out to the Minnesota Chippewa tribe if the child is eligible or affiliated with all UT tribes.
Okay, great. We will continue to answer some of these questions in the chat. I hope that we might have to go a little over at the end here to try to answer a few more questions. But I do want to move next to our drawings. So I'm going to ask Sadie to come back on. So we've got a few more gifts to give away.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
So we have 3 more drawings right now. And just a reminder that they are all donated by the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center. So the first winner of a $50 Target gift card is a Facebook viewer. The name is Taylor Ross. And if you could enter your information in that SurveyMonkey link that will be posted soon. The winner for a $50 Walmart gift card, also a Facebook viewer, is Cindy Ward Thompson. And then the winner of a $50 gift card on Zoom is Courtney Mainville. And if you could fill out the link that I just put in the chat. So again, the winners are Taylor Ross, Cindy Ward Thompson, and Courtney Mainville.
Great, congratulations, winners. I do have one question for panelists before we move to the next section, and that is, when people are reporting, is there a process in which they are interviewed? Why or why not? So this is really for the folks that talked about investigation. If someone could touch on that again. When people are reporting, is there a process that they are interviewed? Why or why not? Thank you, Carrie.
That, Laura. Yeah. So it's really a case-by-case basis. It's best practice to contact the reporter. So if the reporter is anonymous, obviously we can't contact them. If it's a mandated reporter, typically we would contact them. Say if it's a report of prenatal exposure to marijuana and the hospital social worker made the report, they sent everything over. There may not be a need to follow up with them, but we might just to touch base, but it's not mandated that we do so. So it really is case by case. It's usually pretty clear in the report if there's going to be a benefit to do so. If it's a family member, we would typically contact them as well to gather more, because it's all, when a person makes a report and then another person writes it up, you lose information along the way, right? Because it's a game of telephone. And so it is best practice to follow up with the reporter to say, this is what was communicated to me. Is that correct? Do you have any additional concerns? Am I missing anything? Is there anything else you want to relay? This is my contact information so that you can call me and let me know if something else comes up, things like that. So it's not required, but it is best to do so.
Okay, I have one more quick question, if you wouldn't mind answering. Why is it considered a police hold on children? Or maybe the person is asking, is it considered a police hold on children if they are removed from their parents?
I think it's just the linguistics of it, because the police have the authority to do it. So it's a law enforcement, it's a 72-hour hold by way of the police. And so they have the authority to do it. So it's considered a police hold. It's the only way to do that that's not through court. And it's a hold on the child because of the safety issue. So it's not a hold on a parent or something like that. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so next we're going to move to our other panel discussion. I'd like to introduce several folks here. Shannon Smith, who is the Executive Director at the Indian Child Welfare Law Center. We also have with us tonight Teresa Nord, who is a parent mentor at the Indian Child Welfare Law Center. Tyler Bowens, who's a family advocate at Indi Young Center, and Kimberly Whiteface, who's a community member. So I want to welcome you all and thank you for sharing your time and your stories tonight. And I think that we're going to start with Shannon.
Thank you, Laura. So I am Shannon Smith, and I am the director at the ICWA Law Center. I also have Teresa Nord here from the ICWA Law Center, who's a parent mentor. So I am very honored to present with her and everyone else that is here tonight. And in regards to child protection involvement, we're an investigation and intake. We are coming at it from kind of a different space. At the ICWA Law Center, we represent families who are impacted by the child protection system. We represent moms, dads, grandmas, aunts, uncles, and most of the time we're representing moms. And so we're coming at it from the kind of the perspective of what the family may experience. And so I will certainly look forward to hearing kind of that perspective of what the process can feel like, what it can look like. And then I'm happy to kind of jump back on and talk a little bit about legally what some of the things are that you should know if in fact child protection is asking to talk to you, asking to questions about what's going on and kind of what that process may look like and things that you should just take into consideration throughout that. Teresa, do you want to go ahead and start, or Laura, do you have a sense of like specific questions you want us to start with?
Yes, sorry, if you could maybe talk a little bit about when a parent does have a child protection investigation, I guess what you might do as an attorney as far as offering some support or advice on how to engage with child protection. Sometimes we hear from parents, I'm not gonna talk to them. If you could maybe speak a little bit on that.
Sure, absolutely. So obviously having child protection knock on your door or be talking to your family can be a horribly traumatic experience. I think one of the ideals to think about is that if someone is making or is concerned about the safety of your child, or if you're concerned about the safety of a child, that there is a need to kind of look at what's going on, right? Like I don't think anyone on this call or on this webinar would ever want a child to be unsafe. And so if we can start from a place of assuming that, you know, that the hope is to keep children safe, and come from that perspective, what that may look like. And so certainly child protection, if they receive a report, has the obligation, has the duty to really look into what's going on. And that may mean a conversation, or should mean a conversation with, for example, parents who know what's going on best in regards to their child's life. So having those conversations and cooperating in regards to those conversations can be really important. It's not a criminal investigation, and so cooperation can be something that can really help the possibly help in the investigation, right? Like if you have information that you can share in regards to why your child is safe and what's going on, that could really be the end of the investigation. So having, you know, those conversations can be something that's really important. Sometimes having those conversations and where those conversations occur could be really scary. So certainly having those conversations, I think, as Michelle indicated, having someone else along during those conversations can be extremely helpful. If you have an advocate, if you have someone in your life that can be of support and help you through that, that can be something that's really helpful. Also really thinking about location of where those conversations are going to happen. So maybe there's a place where you feel more comfortable, or maybe it's something that initially you don't feel comfortable having someone come into your home, but you feel comfortable even sitting outside, or maybe you have another place, a trusted community center, or a trusted place in the community that you feel okay. And, you know, having that initial conversation, maybe, you know, we offer, for example, our conference room. If there's someone that, you know, is comfortable coming to our office and feels like it's a more neutral setting and someplace that they feel more comfortable with, that is something that's okay to ask. Can we do this? You know, I'm happy to meet with you, but I would like to do it in this space. I would like to do it with these people present. And asking those questions, having a conversation. I think the other two really important questions always to know that you have an opportunity to ask is, well, as was talked about earlier, confidentiality of a reporter is something that has to be legally be protected. It's absolutely okay. And a question that I would ask is, what are the allegations? Why are you coming? What is your concern in regards to what's going on? And it's completely appropriate to ask that in a way so that you have some information. And then also completely appropriate to ask, what can you expect? What are kind of the next steps? What can you anticipate? Certainly, you know, the investigator might not have all the answers, but being able to ask questions yourself to know what's going on, or to get some kind of sense that this can be a conversation and doesn't have to be something where you're the only one that's being asked questions of, can be really helpful. So I think, you know, it's really important to understand that the purpose is to figure out, one, if your child is safe, but then also for you to be able to have an opportunity, because it is not a criminal proceeding. There is a possibility that if you don't say anything, that could be an adversely inferred that you're trying to hide something or whatever. So certainly, if you know, if there's a way to communicate and share, but certainly also being aware that having support, asking questions, and I think Michelle also mentioned this, if you're being asked to sign something or being asked to do something that you're not comfortable with, to listen, take that in, but you don't need to sign anything right away. You don't need to do anything right away, but to be able to know what's being asked of you, and then have the opportunity to go back and talk to either, you know, someone trusted in the community that you're working with, an attorney, an advocate, and really try to figure out what your options are, and asking for the opportunity to go back and talk to the investigator again. I will turn it over, Laura, to you if you want to go ahead and direct the next question.
Yes. So I think the next question, I mean, I guess maybe one more for you would be, I know you talked about, you know, families is definitely able to have advocates be present, you know, at a child protection investigation. Certainly, I always encourage families to reach out to their tribe. At the Minneapolis American Indian Center, what our office does is we work specifically with families that are from tribes outside of the state of Minnesota. So each of the Minnesota tribes, most of them have urban offices and Indian child welfare specialists or representative social workers. There's also, of course, the tribal offices in Minnesota that represent some of the non-metro areas. But I always encourage people to reach out to their tribe as well anytime, you know, something like this happens, because the tribe, you know, if you feel that it will be an ICWA case, will become involved at some point. And it's always helpful for your tribe to know of the situation. And you know, we all do try to work collaboratively together. Sometimes there can be things that can be worked on between county professionals and tribal representatives and the family to come up with different safety plans to, you know, to help keep things from having to come into a child protection court response. So I just always encourage people to reach out to those services, and there you will see a lot of those things posted here. If you miss something, feel free also you can always email Sadie or any of the folks that are on here, or ask a question if you're not sure who to email, and we will send you the information. So I think now I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to share a little bit with us. I'm so thankful you're here to share a little bit of your story as a parent mentor and as someone who had experienced child protection investigation and an intake before. Just what was your experience like? Thank you for being willing to come on and talk about this.
Thank you, Laura. It's an honor to be here tonight. Bonjour, everyone. My name is Teresa Nord. I am a parent mentor at the ICWA Law Center. I think specifically to talk about my personal experience and what it was like to have an investigation was probably single-handedly one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. My investigation or family assessment initially started as a result of a criminal charge that I had gotten as a result of my my relapse, my using at the time. It I believe flagged child protection in the sense that from my daughter's school. Of course, I'm not privy to that information, but that was my kind of my take on things. And it quickly spiraled in a very short period of time. From almost the very beginning of it, I felt very threatened, unsupported. I was really treated in a way that I don't think any parent should be treated. And I felt very alone and scared. And, you know, I appreciate that the professionals here tonight have kind of been talking in a way as though it kind of looks like the process goes in a real, you know, kind of packaged up with a bow on the top. And unfortunately, I don't feel that that happened in my case and in many of the cases of the families that I work with. It is a scary process. And, you know, I think from the very start of it started as an assessment. And very shortly after that is, you know, my daughter made me aware of a situation where she was molested by a friend of mine, a close friend of mine that I had known for 20 years. And I was devastated, and I brought that information to the investigator. And immediately my case went from, just an assessment where she wasn't feeling that there was much need to bring it into court, that she was going to offer some services, to immediately my daughter being removed from my care and put into foster care. And that was not only devastatingly tragic for me, but for my daughter as well. And the experience that she had in the short time that she was in foster care and then put into family placement, she was told, you're never going to see your mom again. Your mom's not a good mom. And I think that's devastating for any child to hear that. Forgive me for being a little emotional sometimes, but I went from having a struggle with my addiction to wanting to die at that point, and not having any sense of a way out, and feeling very unsupported by the child protection team. It's still a very painful subject for me when I have to talk about it, because I look at what it has done to my family and what it has done to my daughter. I was not asked the questions that typically you're supposed to ask in an investigation surrounding culture. I wasn't asked if I have Native American heritage. So there was a violation there in that respect that I didn't learn about until much later on. And I feel like had that question been asked, the case may have gone in a different direction. But immediately once my daughter was removed, it was, putting these unrealistic expectations on me that I just wasn't able to fulfill. And I was also looking at a prison sentence that, unfortunately, the courts and child protection weren't willing to keep my case open because they just looked at the timeline of what my sentencing was versus the time I was actually going to spend in incarceration. And so immediately I was forced to sign over custody of my daughter. And thankfully that opened my eyes. It brought me to my knees, and it brought me to where I am today. And it gave me the strength to find within myself to fight for my daughter back when I got out of incarceration. And so I do have her back in my custody today. But she struggles so immensely with her mental health and depression and suicidal ideations, and a lot of behaviors. And I feel like if at the very beginning, if I was offered services that were reflective of family preservation, I feel like a lot of the trauma could have been spared. And that was my experience. With the families that I work with, a lot of them just are so not in a place of even understanding what ICWA is or what the child protection process is all about. They're scared, they're alone. And so I'm able to step in and say, I can relate, I understand. I am here to be a support, to love you until you can love yourself. To offer assistance in court proceedings, not so much on the legal standpoint, but as a support person that can maybe explain things in layman terms that they can understand in a less scary way. To be able to be there for them and say, I can help walk you through this process so you're not alone. It keeps me going every day. It helps me on my healing journey, which it's been a long time. And in just a couple days, 7 days, I'll have 6 years of sobriety. So, you know, for many of the families that I work with, many of the moms that I work with, they look at that number and they think that's unreachable, but I am a living testament that it can be done. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I show up every day, because my story is my story, and I choose to see the positive in my story. I believe today that had things not gone the way they went, as far as going to prison and starting my journey there, I probably wouldn't be sober today, and I most likely wouldn't have my daughter in my custody. And so her name is Hope, and she gives me hope. Every single day, she gives me hope to keep going. And that's something that I try to convey to the families that I work with. So I know that was a little going off a little bit track of talking about investigation, but I just really want to put it out there for the professionals that do work with our families, that, you know, a lot of what our families have to deal with is the trauma piece of it. And so the approach of going in when you're working with families, if you can go in with a softer approach and not make it so harsh and threatening and scary, and, you know, allow for there to be some space where, you know, the families can share their heartache and their trauma, and not have it be such a scary situation, I think could make all the difference in the world. So miigwech, and thank you for allowing me to share. It's been an honor to be here tonight.
Miigwech, Teresa, thank you so much for sharing with us. Your words are really well taken, and I know we are very supportive of you sharing them here. And I'm sure that they are impactful on the folks listening tonight. I'd like to go next to, we are closing in on our time very quickly, but we will go a little over because we want to allow for Miss Kimberly and also Tyler Bowens from Andayang and Kimberly White, who's a community member, to be able to speak and talk about your experience with child protection investigation. And Tyler, if you'd like to share about your role.
Sure. Thanks, Laura, and thanks, Teresa, for sharing your story. Hopefully you can hear us okay. We have 4 kids in this space with us right now, so it's a family affair.
We hear you just fine.
Okay, good. So I am the family advocate at Andayang Center, and I support families with and without child protection cases or investigations. A big initiative we have here at Andayang Center is to collaborate more with the investigators to prevent court cases from opening up. And that's where I can be present in investigation meetings as a support person for the family, and can help everyone in the room recognize some of the importances around cultural practices, traditional healing, things like that, as well as help the investigator understand some context for the family and see all the positive things that are already happening in spite of you know, unfortunate events that led to the report. I will provide my contact information in the chat, including my email and cell phone. So if there if there's any other need to discuss like resources, or if you want to learn more about Andayang Center and what I do, please reach out to me. And with that, I'll let Kimberly share about her experiences.
Thank you, Kimberly. Appreciate you being here as well. And I'm so glad that you can share your experience with us.
Yes, I'm pretty busy recently, but I'm glad I made time. So with my experience, Mine was a little different. I personally reached out to Tyler about some events that happened in a relationship, and he made a report. And to me, myself, I wasn't upset. I wasn't scared. I actually didn't look at it as a negative. I looked at it as a positive. And why? Because my daughter, my oldest daughter, needed a lot of attention. And Tyler and Michelle was actually the ones who helped me motivate getting her that help mentally. What resources did I find helpful? I honestly wouldn't say it stabilized me and my family's values, made me open my eyes to the bigger picture, and it helped me trust the system a lot better. And why do I say that? Because back in 2016, I had a CPS case open in Idaho. And that was when I barely just turned 18, and I went to a court for my juvenile probation. And when I showed up, they arrested me. And my mom was sitting out in a vehicle with my son, who was only 2 weeks old. And they took her inside and snatched my son away from her. And as I was being transferred to the adult prison, I called my mom to let her know that she could leave the courthouse because I was going to jail. And she was crying, and she said, "They took your baby." And I had to go through some traumatic separation, anxiety, depression. I couldn't eat knowing if my son was eating or not, because he was being breastfed at that time. So I was worried if he was being fed or not. And I had a public defender. My mom got an attorney. While coming court, the attorney told me and my mom both not to speak. Why? Because we were enrolled.
Well, we seem to have lost your connection. We'll see if it comes back on here momentarily.
So Laura, I just want to jump in. So if families wanted to judge, they should let the lawyer know that they want to talk. And if the lawyer does not want them to talk, that's not a good lawyer. I mean, if the family wants to talk with the judge, they can tell the lawyer as to what they want to let the judge know. The lawyer can speak for the family, but if the family really wants to talk to the judge, I think they should be able to talk to the judge.
Thank you, Jill. It looks like we have Kimberly back on, so we'll go back to you, Kimberly.
Sorry.
No, they gave us the option of speaking, but because we were new to the ICWA rights, we did a whole lot of listening. So I would say that experience was pretty scary, but it also helped me learn a lot to when a new CPS case opened, and when investigators came to the 24-hour investigators came to my house, I said, "I will let you know right now that I am enrolled in a tribe, so before you guys can even go further, you guys have to reach out to immediate family of mine, immediate blood family. Not only that, but you guys have to have a written consent or some kind of form, and you guys have to reach out to a tribe to let them know why you're gonna be in contact with me. And before you guys even come to my door again, then please have all that lined up so we can all be on the same page." And they did that. They were very, very, very understanding this time. around. And why? Because I, as a mom, I learned from that past CPS case to where I carried on to this next one, and I stood down, 10 toes down, and I helped them along their services with being with my family. So it was a good experience in my eyes, because it helped me open the values of me and my kids again. What additional services would you have liked? I know there was a bulletin put up about something about the mental health with kids, the trauma that they go through and that it affects them mentally. So I would like to know what are some services that you guys can provide the children, no matter the ages, whether it's play therapy or, you know, some counseling or something. What are some resources that we can do to help our kids so that when they do come home to us moms, then we don't have to deal with that trauma. We don't have to, you know, it's not like I'm complaining about it. It's more of, why are you going to add more onto our plates when we already try to jump through your guys' hoops? Or, you know what I mean? So that's where I'm coming from. You guys want to make sure that the kids are safe, but what about them mentally and physically safe? Because when a kid mentally breaks down, they're physically not okay, you know? So I'm just asking, from everyone else's perspective, what could you do for the mental health?
Thank you so much, Kimberly. I will see if there's anyone here that wants to answer any of that, of what you said. I think that what both you and Teresa said is tremendously important. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your stories with the folks that are listening here tonight, as well as with all of the professionals. It is very clear that when child protection gets involved, that there can very easily be trauma to the family, to the parent, and to the children. And so there's lots of things to think about and try to assist with when that happens. If members of our Metro Urban Indian Directors group would like to put on your camera if you are able to, I just wanted to say a thank you to all of you for participating in both planning this joint educational event tonight, as well as just thank you for all of your time and efforts in putting this all together and speaking to those of you that spoke. There are a few questions that we did not get to. We are still, we did do our best to provide anything that we could that was a general answer. And we do have, and we did respond in the chat to those folks that had pretty specific concerns. So, however, if for some reason you still feel like you had something that didn't get answered, please reach out. We are happy to get your question to the right person so that you do get an answer. Again, my name is Laura Newton. I am the Family Services Program Director at the Minneapolis American Indian Center and co-chair of the Metro Urban Indian Directors Family Preservation Committee, along with Sadie Hart and Gary Smith. So I just want to thank you all for coming tonight. I want to thank you all for your participation.